Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an
The
atheist.
fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist worldwide.
I have a confession to make. I'm a sucker for those 1950s sci-fi films. You know, the kind of stuff that they lampoon on Mystery Science Theater 3000. Or I guess it's Riff Tracks now. But it used to be Mystery Science Theater 3000. Low budget, like very low budget. Usually cast with unknown actors. You could probably toss all the separate movie elements from these flicks into a big pile and just randomly pick out some pieces and link them all together, and you would end up with generally the same kind of movie. The ingredients are mostly the same stuff. This is what has been on my mind today. Now, these are actual film titles from the era, stuff like Earth versus the Flying Saucers, Phantom from Space, This Island Earth, which, by the way, was lampooned in the film version of MST 3000. Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. Tobor the Great. By the way, it's so clever because Tobor is robot spelled backwards. Radar Men from the Moon, that kind of thing. A whole generation of these films that came out. The kind of filmmaking that was made for late-night television and frat parties and mystery science theaters. Now, of course, at the time, a whole lot of this stuff was not considered cheesy or quaint. 60 years ago, a whole lot of it was considered the bleeding edge of science playing out on screen. Look how futuristic it is. Look, there's a flying saucer hanging from fishing wire. It's amazing. It levitates, that kind of thing. Remember the old creature from the Black Lagoon film? I guess, apparently, in the day, 60-some years ago, it scared the crap out of people. People flipped out over this thing. Have you seen the creature from the Black Lagoon? It's a guy in a freaking rubber suit. It is the least scary thing you've ever seen. If a guy showed up at a Halloween party, he probably wouldn't even get the best costume prize. But back then, it freaked a generation out. Back then, it was the stuff of what might be one day reality. And times have changed, and one day we'll look back on today and we'll have the same kind of conversation, right? Remember, we have more computing power. We have more freaking science in our cell phones than all of NASA used to put the first men on the moon back in the 1960s. Is that crazy? Think about it. Your kids have no idea what it was like to have to cook a baked potato in the oven. We have a microwave with a potato button on it. They don't remember life before call waiting. God, did that suck. Now you try to call somebody on your rotary phone, by the way. No way to get through. There's no call waiting. There's no way to let the person on the other end know that you're trying to get through and you have something important for them. And if they had a teenager on the phone for hours, you were screwed. It was actually better to get in the car and drive over there than it was to try to just continue to turn that rotary dial over and over and over. We got hundreds and hundreds of freaking TV channels today. Anybody remember back when we had 3+ public television? And if the president was on, he was on every channel. There were no other options, right? The State of the Union screwed your whole night. I mean, you think about it, the telegraph used to be cutting edge. Wow, this technology sure is amazing. We can communicate through wires. And then the radio. Oh, my goodness. Wow, it's theater of the mind, broadcast right into our homes. It's unbelievable. Hell, the printing press wasn't even around till the 1400s, which in the grand scheme of things is like yesterday, right? I mean, the advancements of science today, what are they going to look like in just a few decades? Well, who knows? Who knows? What I do know is this, that science is just awesome. It just is. What we're discovering, what we're creating, the lens through which we're seeing the world that science provides, our modern day conveniences, all of those cool things that we often take for granted. I mean, it's like opening a gift every single day. Every day, science gives us something new to talk about, something new to experience. It's amazing. For that reason, I felt like this show was going to celebrate science. Science is just awesome. Now, it's a hugely subjective topic because we're going to talk about what you consider to be the greatest contributions and advancements of science. What are the things you feel were the game changers? If you had to make a top 5 list, what would be on it? And that's what the bulk of our calls and emails are going to be about. And we'll take a look at some specific instances of people we know sounding off on the issue of science. Allow me to start with somebody you already know. And I love this clip. Julie on our Facebook page asked that I play it, and I immediately made a note and grabbed the soundbite. Richard Dawkins was at the Sheldonian Theatre in Oxford on the 15th of February of this year. And there was a Christian in the audience, I believe it was a Christian, critical of the scientific method. And Dawkins' reply was priceless.
It works. Planes fly, cars drive, computers compute.
It's an inductive argument.
If you base medicine on science, you cure people. If you base the design of planes on science, they fly. If you base the design of rockets on science, they reach the moon. It works, bitches.
Pretty good stuff. I'd like to know what you think as we talk about science, its advancements, its contributions. Science is just awesome. Area code 661. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
This is Kyle. I'm calling from Poland.
Kyle, thanks for waiting on me. What do you have for us on this podcast?
Well, I'm a paleontologist, actually, and I thought I'd like to talk a little about paleontology, if that's okay with you.
Please do.
Well, personally, myself, there's so many things I could talk about, but I'm going to go with the latest batch of feathered dinosaur discoveries we've had in, say, the last 20 years that have really just absolutely proved the fact that birds are living dinosaurs. For example, we have these fantastic fossils coming out of particularly China at the moment. We have one in particular called Microraptor, which is probably likely to have been able to at least glide to some extent. It had feathers pretty much all over its body. There's a little bit of debate as to whether it actually could fly or not, but still not really that important. But it almost certainly shows that birds definitely are dinosaurs beyond doubt. There's feathered dinosaurs everywhere, not just in the immediate relatives to birds, but even just outside it held a line to T-Rex as feathered dinosaurs in it.
I wish they'd invent the time machine, because that's one thing from a safe distance I would like to observe with my own eyes. I mean, we see the dinosaur fossils, but to be able to see with our own eyes, we've seen what Hollywood does with the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the Velociraptor. Yeah. I would imagine being able to see how it really was. How did these creatures interact, the majesty and the danger and all. I mean, just the amazing spectacle of seeing these creatures that are actually walking the earth and not just something we read about in a textbook. Anything else?
Actually, I'd like to ask you personally one question, because I've heard and read a lot about your journey from Christianity to atheism, and I'm not sure I've ever heard of what your stance when you were a Christian was on the whole creationism evolution issue.
Well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version.
Oh, please do.
The tactic normally for us was to make us suspicious of what they called secular science. There's a tendency to automatically distrust a scientist who does not operate from a scriptural foundation. And that's what happens when you brainwash a child to start with the Bible and filter everything through it. A great example, and I've used it many times, was watching Carl Sagan's Cosmos, this amazing, groundbreaking scientific moment in our history. as he sort of brings science to life and educates millions. And instead, I'm sitting there watching in a very religious environment, and I'm discarding left and right anything that includes the word evolution, anything that does not fit into the Genesis story, anything that doesn't fit into the biblical cookie cutter. And it's funny because you can teach yourself or be taught by others to be hugely selective. You can throw you can throw the baby and the bathwater out and the whole upper floor. You can just chuck it all. If you believe that you have started from a position of spiritual enlightenment, it's a great justification. And our science books were honestly embarrassingly rudimentary. We learned what a star was, fine. But we learned about it not as far as how old it was and helping to better understand a billions-year-old cosmos. It was God created the star, and God set the stars into the heavens. And it was that kind of sort of crayon science that they taught us. And unfortunately, for many, it continues into high school. There's a Christian school in Louisiana that's teaching as fact that the Loch Ness Monster is real and that it's a plesiosaur. So there's a whole culture of kids in those classes that are going, man, I sure would like to go see Loch Ness, go see the monster, the plesiosaur, which is obviously a fact because I learned about it in science class. It's horrifying. It took me a long time to get out of that lazy, hazy mentality, and I'm embarrassed now that I wasn't bolder about asking questions, about saying, hey, wait a minute. But when they teach you that evolution is a dirty word, that evolution is a lie of Satan, and that heaven and hell are in the balance, they honestly keep you in a box, and it takes a lot to crawl out of it. It takes a lot to get out. Does that answer your question at all, sir?
Yes, it does quite a lot. It seems quite strange to me, actually, that it is so much the case that the U.S. has the whole...
Yeah, it's the U.S. is a great way to sort of sum it up. It's the U.S. In fact, I'm going to play a clip.
I'm not blaming the U.S.
No, please do. Look, I love my country. I love this country. The United States makes me face palm. Day in and day out. I'm going to play a clip later on in the show with Carl Sagan himself talking about science literacy in this country. And he will sum up better than I ever could what we are up against in the U.S. And I think you'll be interested to hear it, my friend. Thanks for the call, and thanks for being a part of the show. Take care of yourself. All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Listener from Poland. That is amazing. I had an email from Mick. He said, there are too many reasons to celebrate science, but here are a few in no particular order. Medical science has allowed the human life expectancy to double. 2010 average life expectancy compared to the early 1900s. From a geocentric worldview, we've gone to a view of a far more exciting, majestic, and inspiring cosmos that defies imagination in its grandeur, its awesome power and immense size. No supernatural forces are required. A lot of the, quote, magic of Star Trek, TOS, TNG, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, wow, you are a fan, has been realized, but I'm still waiting for the transporter. The transporter scares me. I'll come back to that. Mick says, science has made the statement, we don't understand, we don't know, cool. Well, that's the best place for a scientist to be. No invocation of deities or supernatural powers necessary. As a side note, I heard an interview with a CERN LHC scientist from before the Higgs boson was found. He said something like, if we find the Higgs, we know our understanding of the world is on the right track, and that's good. However, if we don't find the Higgs, well, that means there's something fundamental about the world we don't understand, and that'd be even better because that's a very good place for a scientist to be in. And at last but not least, a celebration of the scientific method. If a hypothesis turns out to be incorrect, it is discarded. If experimental evidence is contrary to predictions based on a model, the model is discarded. Science is a harsh mistress. Fortunately, reality doesn't give a damn about what we think, believe, or want. It is just there for us to discover. Mick, thanks for a great email. Let me back up to the transporter. And one other thing that just popped into my little pea brain. The idea of, and I have no idea, what the science supposedly is behind the transporter. I'm the guy who grew up watching classic Trek, and everybody thought, wow, wouldn't that be awesome? Those of us who have at one time or other in our lives traveled for a living have fantasized about being able to walk into the chamber and hit the button, and I am there. Wouldn't that be freaking amazing? No more airport lobbies, no more layovers, no more rental cars. You can just be there. It'd be awesome. But the idea of, and I believe I read that the idea of the transporter is that you would essentially be killed and then reconstructed. It's not that the transporter would grab the molecules that the science community is going to destroy me. Please ignore my ignorance. Please go with me on this journey. Thank you very much. It would not reach down and grab the molecules of your body and then somehow zip them into another place. It would essentially replicate that molecule and rebuild it from scratch in another place. What was that movie? I read a similar device in a book by Michael Crichton called Timeline. I think it's called Timeline, about time travel. And essentially it's saying, yes, this machine kills you, and then it reconstructs every atom in your body in another place and time. Now that is freaky. We live in a world where the coffee pot doesn't always work correctly. You know what I'm saying? When you put the key in the ignition of the car and you turn, you may or may not get it to start. We live in the era of the blue screen of death on our computer screens, right? If you are being transported and there's a power bump, you arrive in another place with a hand coming out of your forehead or something like that. Yes, he arrived. Part of him is here, 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 and here. Now that scares the crap out of me. There's another thing just popped into my mind. Back in the 50s, I know they were talking about all of the advancements that we were going to enjoy. Stuff like, I think it was in the 80s, they talked about the paperless office. Anyone remember that conversation? Oh, there's coming a day when you'll never need paper. It's all going to be digital. And now we're still mashing Post-it notes onto the computer monitors. Well, one of the things they used to talk about back in the day, and I think this was in the golden age around 50s, they talked about the flying car. One day we'll all have a flying car. Is anything more frightening to you than the idea of a flying automobile with an ordinary civilian behind the wheel? Right? I know people who've gotten into car accidents in the parking lot. I was just driving around the corner and I hit somebody's bumper. I was just messing with the stereo. Didn't see it coming. Came out of nowhere. Do we really want that guy at 300 feet traveling 120 miles an hour? Hell no. You know, you have a fender bender here on terra firma. You got a couple of scratches on the bumper and you're exchanging information. You have a fender bender in a flying car and you are a charcoal briquette on the ground. It's over. Every mistake, almost every mistake at that level is a lethal mistake. So I, unlike so many others, will never welcome the flying car. I think the last thing we need are the people cruising down the highway tonight, texting at 80 miles an hour, swaying back and forth with a seatbelt hanging out of the door, making sparks on the concrete. The last thing we need to do is give them a pilot's license and shoot them into the air at high speed so that they can essentially become a missile that takes out the rest of us. Let's see who else is talking today. Area code 951. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who is this?
This is Heidi.
Hi, Heidi. Thanks for waiting on my long and needless rant. Glad you called the show. What's going on?
Well, I'm actually excited to talk about science because I remember reading Carl Sagan for the first time, his Demon Haunted World book. Have you ever read that?
I have not read Demon Haunted World, no.
It's really good. He really addresses pseudoscience, which is really a huge threat in America especially, because half the problem, I think, with talking about science with people is they don't seem to really know the difference between real science and fake science. And that actually is kind of a problem because you have astrology, crystal healings, that kind of crazy stuff. And I remember he really kind of set it straight for me, really kind of cleared my mind because it was almost overwhelming at first to kind of figure out, sifting through all the knowledge that we know, what do I call real and truth and all that stuff. And it really kind of set it straight for me. And he has a really good quote that explains how I look at science. He says, when you fall in love, you want to tell the world. That's exactly how I feel ever since I discovered science.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I do. It's funny. I saw a documentary called The Enemies of Reason. Richard Dawkins was walking around one of these New Age fairs, going from booth to booth, allowing them to try out these crystal devices or healing devices or chi devices, whatever they were, on him. And of course, the look on his face is priceless. What's horrifying, though, is how expensive those quote-unquote treatments are. You go in, you lay down under colored crystals. Some people are paying on the order of hundreds and hundreds of dollars an hour. I mean, Heidi, you and I are in the wrong business. If we weren't moral people, we could be out there totally cashing in.
That's right. I think definitely when it comes to money, it's even Neil deGrasse Tyson says science is like the vaccine from the charlatans of the world. You know, it really saves you from throwing your money away to something that is like a placebo effect that maybe makes you feel good or you just know is complete BS. So, I mean, it's just scary to me because I think like you mentioned earlier, you're kind of almost embarrassed with America, the country that we live in, this great country where we have freedom of speech and all these rights that was revolutionary, the idea at the time. But we're seeing like churches and lies becoming almost like a free market, and it's all about just bringing in the masses and not telling the truth. And it really bothers me. So I hopefully in the future, I'm heading to college this summer to use film as an outlet and to make documentaries and kind of bring the conscious awareness with that issue to America.
Are you a producer? Are you a video producer or what?
Yes, I am.
Good for you. I met a kindred spirit today. This movement needs more storytellers. We have a dearth of storytellers. We have such a good message, but we really need to be refining how we can get the message out there. The idea that you're going to be part of that solution really makes me happy. Does it frighten you that we live in a culture where there's let's call it a headline about Higgs boson or about cloning technology or stem cells or something along those lines. And if you ask someone on the street, they have no idea what you're talking about. They're busy talking about the rerun of Duck Dynasty that was on the night before. I mean, I'm not knocking Duck Dynasty. What I'm saying is, have we become a culture of people who are we're like the humans in the film WALL-E. We're used to being spoon-fed and entertained. We are this lazy, hazy culture of children in adult bodies. I mean, does that strike you at all, Heidi?
It really, actually, I think about it all the time. And that's why I feel an obligation more than ever to bring awareness to it, like I said, through film. And it's just scary because, in that book I mentioned to you, The Demon Haunted World, Carl Sagan makes that exact point. He almost prophesizes it in a way, and it really has come to that point where I sit in class and I look at the students that I learn with, and I don't see an environment where it's about innovation or thinking outside of the box or thinking critically. It's about wanting to get that answer for the multiple choice so you can pass the final. And cheating, which does no service for the individual who you would think would want to learn, but I feel like we take it for granted now.
Well, there's also a difference between memorizing and regurgitating information and really understanding and learning. You know, it's funny when I remember, I don't know how many classes I would have, and we'd have, you've got 3 tests. I'm going to cram for the test. So I memorized the words, but I wasn't really being educated. I wasn't understanding, and the information was not cementing itself in my mind so that I could go and then implement it some way, or at least recall it correctly down the way. I was getting through the next 24 to 36 hours so that I could pass the test and then forget it and then move on to the next series of questions that I had to memorize the answers to. Part of me wonders if the system requires an overhaul in many ways.
I agree. And, it's funny, whenever, I was kind of stuck in that mindset for a while going into high school where I was wanting to just cram and get the grade. And then I took AP English just because I love English so much. I took it grade 11, and we actually were studying, the curriculum was about rhetoric, about argument, persuasive essay, looking at both sides of the argument. And I'll be honest with you, that set the stage for me to ask questions. I found your video Afterlife, and it was a process, and that then and there I said, I don't believe anymore. And because of AP English and the class and all that all together, I have this excitement for learning unlike anything. I take AP psychology my senior year, and I love it. Every project she gives me or assigns me, everyone is groaning and moaning about it, and I actually look forward to coming up to ideas and going home and how I can apply psychology, all this sort of stuff. Learning is exciting. I just look forward to taking in as much as I can every day and challenging myself. It's really liberating, and it makes me really sad that people take it for granted. It's really upsetting to me sometimes.
People like you are the reason, though, that reason is rising in this culture. I'm glad for the opportunity to speak to you. You inspire me, Heidi. Thanks for a great call and for being a part of the show.
Thank you. And thank you for the type of community you've created and for your blogs. I love listening to you. You have a great voice, and it's really relaxing. You have a lot to say, and I appreciate it.
Well,
so thank you very much.
It means a lot, Heidi. Take care of yourself.
You too. Bye.
I'm not going to, this is largely a positive show. And in fact, I've got some very cool references queued up here in just a few moments, plus more of your calls and emails. But I do want to deal for just a moment with the problem of science illiteracy. Now, I have two challenges here. Is that one, I want to participate in the discussion about science, but I'm not a scientist. I love learning. I love learning how science is discovering our world. I love reading about what scientists are doing, but I am not a scientist. I find myself sometimes apologizing, right? Like, oh, well, I'm not a scientist. I'm not really qualified to speak about that. I am guilty in many ways, as are so many of us, of standing on the shoulders of those who do have the degree, who do have the pedigree, who do have the life experience, who have made science their life's work. And, it's not that I can't have an opinion or you can't have an opinion after examining what they are publishing and what they're writing about and speaking about. I think we can't opt out of the discussion, but it's a little bit of a challenge because part of me realizes I am vastly underqualified. I am not Neil deGrasse Tyson. If he goes and speaks about something that is hugely, Lawrence Krauss, they just announced that he's going to be the keynote speaker at the Oklahoma Free Thought Convention on June the 22nd in Oklahoma City. What an awesome speech that's going to be. I saw Krauss in Kamloops last year, and he did a variation on a universe from nothing. And he's talking about all sorts of geeky stuff. I mean, heavy, thick stuff. Now, he was dumbing it down for us. He was totally streamlining it for the audience. And it was still, some of it, you found yourself going, I'm an idiot. I don't know. I'm stupid. Compared to all of this, I'm a minnow in the ocean. But I was smiling from ear to ear. You should have seen the audience. We were absolutely beside ourselves. We were having a ball. We were learning. We were hearing the words of someone who was an expert in his field, someone who had information that we had not yet heard. Many of us had not ever heard in this way. We were sponging it up. We'd fallen in love with science. It's like when you're watching a YouTube video of someone who is speaking on science or cosmology or philosophy or what have you, and you aren't necessarily a scientist or a philosopher or what have you, but you are in the classroom. You are sponging up information. You are hearing a perspective. You can, in some ways, in some level, develop opinions. You can be a part of the conversation. That is what I'm trying to apologize less and less for. I've got my hand up going, please pick me, just talk to me. Just teach me something. That is something huge. I do find myself also apologizing for a culture that is largely unaware of how science works. Look, in the Christian culture, it is epidemic. We had no idea when I was a believer how evolution really worked. It was this simple bumper sticker. I didn't come from no monkey, right? My granddaddy wasn't no ape. From goo to you, that does not explain this miraculous world that I live in and the body that was obviously created by the Savior. This is how we are taught to speak. Did I know the first thing? Did I read Darwin? No. I knew Darwin was the bad guy right off the bat. Darwin, he wasn't just a guy who had information I disagreed with. He was an agent of the evil one. I mean, come on. I'm ashamed of my own illiteracy in these matters. And Sagan himself did an interview with Charlie Rose back in 1996. As I understand it, it was his last interview before he passed away, and he addressed the issue of science literacy.
We've arranged a society based on science and technology in which nobody understands anything about science and technology. And this combustible mixture of ignorance and power, sooner or later, is going to blow up in our faces. I mean, who is running the science and technology in a democracy if the people don't know anything about it? And the second reason that I'm worried about this is that science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along.
It's almost a great philosophy for living, his line that said, "Science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking." From Pale Blue Dot, a vision of the human future in space, published in 1994. Carl Sagan himself said these words, or wrote these words. He said, "Once we overcome our fear of being tiny, we find ourselves on the threshold of a vast and awesome universe that utterly dwarfs in time and space and in potential the tidy, anthropocentric proscenium of our ancestors. We gaze across billions of light years to space to view the universe shortly after the Big Bang and plumb the fine structure of matter. We peer down into the core of our planet and the blazing interior of our star. We read the genetic language in which is written the diverse skills and propensities of every being on Earth. We uncover hidden chapters in the record of our origins, and with some anguish better understand our nature and prospects. We invent and refine agriculture, without which almost all of us would starve to death. We create medicines and vaccines that save the lives of billions. We communicate at the speed of light and whip around the earth in an hour and a half. We have sent dozens of ships to more than 70 worlds and 4 spacecraft to the stars. We are right to rejoice in our accomplishments, to be proud that our species has been able to see so far, and to judge our merit in part by the very science that has so deflated our pretensions." Wonderfully said by Carl Sagan. Area code 484. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who is this?
It's Quentin.
Quentin, thank you for calling. What's going on?
Hey, I bumped into you at the Reason Rally. I was the large guy who happened upon you while you were setting up your camera, and I went, "Holy crap, it's Seth," but I didn't say crap. I said something else.
Dude, you can say whatever you want. We're all adults here, you know. You can say the 4-letter word.
Shit.
It's not that scandalous. You're gonna be. I had a ball at the Reason Rally. I'm sorry if I was a bit scatterbrained. I just found out, by the way, that in the new documentary called The Unbelievers with Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss, I guess there's a B-roll shot of me meeting Lawrence Krauss in the crowd at the Reason Rally. I guess it's included in the film. And of course, now I'm horrified because I remember that day. You know, my fat ass is running around in the rain like a drowned rat, running from place to place with a camera, trying to document this history-making moment in time with one camera. And I happened to see Krauss, and I ran up to him shamelessly. "Oh, Lawrence Krauss, Mr. Krauss, I'm so glad to meet you. I'm so glad to meet you." The idea that moment is on film somewhere is a little bit scary to me. But the event was amazing, and I was glad for the chance to meet you. What do you think about all this stuff? We're talking about science is just awesome.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of science. I like many people in our generation. Star Trek did it for me. Original series. Growing up with that, checking it out, being fascinated by it, being inspired by it, being in some cases entertained by it. But I'm all about it. To answer your question from the top of the show, for me, I'm thinking the best or greatest scientific invention for my money, it's got to be the laser. It's got to be the laser. I mean, you think about where it is in all of our technology. You think about what it does for us, in terms of measuring accuracy, in terms of medicine, scientific research. It's the laser. I'm not saying that we wouldn't be terribly further along without it. It's just ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
You have to say it like Dr. Evil, though. You have to put those little air quotes up and go, "the laser." You have to do it.
No, sharks and lasers. No, I can't do it. I can't bring myself to do it.
So do you, and just off the top, do you count Deep Space Nine as Star Trek? I count the classic. I count Next Generation. Even Voyager. DS9, and I know there's a whole group of people out there who are about to send me hate mail, but I just never felt like DS9 was really Star Trek. What's wrong?
Well, they can divide it between us because not a fan. No, it didn't float my ducky. No,
they'll come after us and hurt us with a laser. That's what's going to happen. Dude, thanks for the call and thanks for listening. I appreciate you, my friend.
Not a problem. Anytime, sir.
All right, thank you. Area code 513. You are now on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
It's Mario.
What's going on, Mario? Are you just going to call every show?
No, I actually was going to skip today. I was deliberately going to say, I'm just going to listen and sit back. But you hit one of my favorite topics, science. One of my favorite quotes. Remember when they hired Richard Feynman to investigate the defect? I can't remember what the stupid thing was called. O-ring. When he did the study, he gave a speech to Congress. And one of my favorite quotes comes from that speech. He says, "There comes a time when reality takes precedence over public relation, for nature cannot be fooled."
Beautiful,
and I thought, okay, back to Star Trek. Do you remember in the classic Star Trek, the episode, I think it was called The Changeling? The robot that crashed with another robot, and they merged.
I've seen them all. I'm drawing a blank for some reason. But go ahead and make your point, and I'll come to your.
They found him. Kirk. He beamed aboard, and he started following him around. He thought Kirk was his mother. He thought, "Oh, you're the Kirk who created me. You are the creator." Anyway, your idea of the transporter is kind of shot in this thing because at the very end, when they confuse this robot, they got him all confused, and so he's in this feedback loop. He's about ready to explode, and they run him over to the transport room, and they beam him into deep space. Okay, and then when he's there, you see this explosion, right? Well, if your idea of the transporter is just transporting data, that would make sense.
Is that the one where the robot was levitating and it looked like it was hanging off a fishing wire?
That's it.
Yeah, and it was. I think V'ger from the first Star Trek film was loosely based on an entity like.
It was modeled.
Yeah.
Yep,
all right, I get it.
After that.
And it'd come back to sort of bond with its creator, yeah. It's funny because I know some people who look back at the sort of spit and polish special effects of the classic Trek and they just don't get it. And I love it, even now. Whenever I see Kirk and the Gorn, I'm up on my feet, kick his ass. I'm just totally shameless.
The classics they're classic. I mean, that's all there is. But, like I said, when they beamed him into deep space, he blew up. So that implies that they beamed him bodily.
Yeah.
They actually transported. So that. By the way, do you consider what's that episode with Captain Janeway, the woman captain?
Voyager. I consider Voyager Star Trek. I enjoyed Voyager. It's DS9 that I could not connect with. I could not connect with the material. And it's funny because all of the people I knew, and there were several who were Trek fans, would quote the DS9 episodes, and they knew all the characters, and they totally followed it. And I really did give it a shot, and I just could not engage. And to this day, Classic and Next Generation are really my 1-2 punch for Star Trek, and everything else I just sort of blink until it goes away.
Yeah. Well, let me make one more point, and then I'll skip out here.
Quickly, yeah, sure.
It's interesting. I just got done listening to Kenneth Miller. You know who Ken Miller is, right?
Mm-hmm, yes.
Okay. He has a whole talk on the collapse of intelligent design, and it's really all about education and the detrimental effect of creationism / intelligent design, and the subtle effect it has on children. When they're taught this stuff, and it's a great talk. So if you ever get have a 45 minutes to listen, it's called "The Collapse of Intelligent Design" by Ken Miller.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for the call.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Take it easy. I was sort of browsing some of what the online community had to say about science. There was an article in The Guardian from last year by Jonathan Jones that actually said this. The header was, "Science is more beautiful than art." Well, I hadn't heard it put quite that way before, so I took a look at the article, and I found a couple of paragraphs I thought you might want to hear. Good fodder for discussion. It is science, according to Jonathan Jones' article, it is science that now provides the most beautiful and provocative images of our world, not to mention other worlds. It is hard to name an image made by an artist in the last 2 decades that is as fascinating or memorable as, say, the Hubble telescope's pictures of the Eagle Nebula or the Whirlpool Galaxy. A visit to the Hubble's website, HubbleSite.org, with its tours of the cosmos, its astronomy photographs free to print, and its movie theater chronicling the birth throes and death pangs of stars, is arguably as rewarding as a trip to any museum. And then there are all those images of deep-sea worlds taken by submersibles, among them National Geographic shots of the deepest hydrothermal vents ever discovered. Emissions from these volcanic chimneys, nicknamed black smokers, and located 3 miles below the surface of the Caribbean Sea, provide extraordinary images. They are also hot enough to melt lead. The volcanoes, not the images. It's poorly written, sorry. Yet it is not on purely visual grounds that science seems to dwarf today's art. Proponents of contemporary art are quick to point out that it is not necessarily about the visual. Ever since the rise of conceptual art in the late 1960s, art has claimed an intellectual territory of provocation and contemplation beyond the visible. Yet it is here that science wins hands down. What notion of any current artist can compare with the sublime craziness of quantum physics, in which objects can exist in multiple states and places at the same time? Let alone the awe-inspiring prediction and apparent discovery of the Higgs boson after a 45-year search. Here is a real conceptual art, and it turns your head inside out, merely trying to grasp its most basic premises, in particular that all the matter we can see appears to comprise just 4% of the universe, the Higgs providing a possible gateway to understanding that remaining 96%. Once, art and science truly worked as equals. In the researches of Leonardo da Vinci, for instance, in the 21st century, art rarely rivals the capacity for wonder that modern science displays in such dazzling abundance. I will include a link to the article in the description box of this show. I had an email in from Tim. He said, the scientific advancement or discoveries that have contributed most to our lives, figuring out that germs cause diseases instead of demons, and how to fight them. I met a lady who survived the 1918 flu when she was 2 years old. That particular pandemic killed about 3% of the world's population. She told me that a later fever epidemic killed 6 of her brothers within a 2-month period. I can't imagine what that would be like. The anti-vaxxers should read what life used to be like before vaccines. Forget autism. We're talking about having to have lots of kids because most of them die. Tim, thank you very much for the message. He's absolutely right. I mean, conquering disease, and you think about what science has provided us. Isaac Newton, his law of universal gravitation, figuring out that gravity is the force that draws objects toward each other, right? Electricity. Michael Faraday, 1821, discovered that when a wire carrying a current is placed to a single magnetic pole, the wire will rotate, right? That leads to the development of what? The electric motor. Darwin's theory of evolution transformed how we view our world and transformed science. Germ theory. French chemist Louis Pasteur, 1860s, experimenting with bacteria. People didn't know where disease came from, right? They thought it was demons or who knows what it was. And he not only discovered that disease came from microorganisms, but he realized bacteria could be killed. There were ways to do battle against disease. Einstein's theory of relativity, the Big Bang theory, penicillin, the invention of penicillin, plastic, computers, x-rays, quantum theory. You think about all of the cool stuff. I went through just sort of a random, just really random list of just awesome stuff that science has provided or discovered that transformed somebody's world, if not all of our world, starting with the abacus, the barcode, the invention of the bicycle. Doesn't sound like a big deal now. The smartphone, the screwdriver, the invention of aspirin, the pacemaker, the video camera, Teflon, the compass, the internet, the digital watch. Remember when those first came out? Wow, they were expensive and rare. Vaccines, dynamite, electric razors, email, satellites, fiber optics, the aircraft, the spacecraft, freaking indoor plumbing, the ability to send a letter thousands of miles in 2 days for about 46 cents. GPS, the internal combustion engine, the zipper, the iPod, the laser, the ink pen, the slinky, the lawnmower, light bulbs, the contraceptive, the microchip, the microwave oven, the pocket calculator, skyscrapers, the robot, the battery, the vending machine, human-made diamonds, right? Make them in a couple of weeks using a machine, and science, microscopes, the LCD display, the invention of Kevlar, the sewing machine, eyeglasses and contacts, elevators, the automobile, the stethoscope, parachutes, the number 2 pencil, the Swiss Army knife, the radio, the TV, the vacuum cleaner, air conditioning, radar, anesthesia, the word processor, cloning technology, the coffee maker, Velcro and power tools, the thermometer, bullet trains, the MRI, the flashlight, the submarine, fire extinguishers, motion pictures. I could go on and on and on all night. In a conversation I recently had with D.P.R. Jones, he made a pretty bold statement. He said, I think that the people in the religious community who are so often skeptical and speaking out against science should be denied the opportunity to use any of the benefits that science has provided. No internet for you. Not from them evil scientists. I don't know that I take quite that hard a line, but it does bring up an interesting argument. If they're going to go out and talk about the evils of science and how science has been corrupted, why are they using so much crap that has been provided by science? Back to the phones. Let's talk to area code 330. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, it's Taylor.
Taylor, thanks for waiting on my rant. What's going on?
I was starting to flip through a dictionary to see how many things you were actually just listed off.
I was sort of just pinballing around looking for the stuff that rung my bell. And it's funny because we have forgotten more awesome stuff than we could ever really remember. That's the day and age we live in. You know, it's just amazing. Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think about all this?
Well, you listed the one thing I was going to say is probably, I think, the biggest game changer, which would be the internet. I mean, I know it's, the sum of its parts. You could say, any single part of what led to the internet is just as important. But I can't think of anything, at least in my lifetime, that's done more to change the face of all of society.
I can't imagine 30 years ago if I had a question and I needed an answer. I was looking at a drive downtown to the library, right? Yeah. Or finding an Encyclopedia Britannica or something. I mean, it was such a chore. And
yeah, I'm at that age where, like, I still remember early grade school where we still had the card catalogs. It was I was in school just before the internet, and as the internet started to pick up.
What happens in a conversation is you and I look at each other and go, what? No. Hey, somebody Google that. And they pull out their smartphone, and in about 25 seconds, they have a reputable website that talks about what it is and how it works. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's why some of this scientific illiteracy that we still have going on right now just drives me up a freaking wall. Yeah. Like, it takes 3 seconds to get
decent information on any subject anymore. You know, I've got a neighbor who I've known for years who's been in the hospital for months because 10 years ago she went to a chiropractor instead of a real doctor, and suddenly the problems have been compounding on her. They also happen to be born-again evangelical Christians, and you know, I
was going to recommend crystal therapy, but if they're evangelicals, that might not be the best remedy.
It just seems to be part of the larger problem, like the whole taking things on faith when there's no evidence for it, whether it's religion or, you know, pseudoscience. It's damaging people.
I know people who are
damaging
they're
people.
part of a pyramid scheme in the homeopathic market. You know, they know nothing about medicine, right? They're like the rest of us. They go to the doctor and they pay the doctor to tell them what's going on. But what they've done is they've been sold the bill of goods that if it's all natural, it must be good for you. And if it's provided by evil Western medicine, it must be part of a racket or bad for you. And so what they do is they pitch to all their friends and family, hey, look, I've got this little vial of whatever, lawn clippings or shark cartilage or whatever it is, and I just know it works here. And I'm like, I look at them, I go, you don't have the first clue what you're talking about. You don't even...
Well, arsenic's all natural.
Hello, you know, cow shit is all natural. I'm not eating it. Thank you very much. I'm just not doing it. But I think if you have a culture of sheep, or you have a culture of people who are ready to, you know, P.T. Barnum was absolutely right. There is a sucker born every minute. I mean, there are people eager to believe the first convincing argument that comes along. And geez, if you get money involved, now you're really screwed.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I see science making strides. And honestly, the internet has educated so many of us beyond. I mean, if it hadn't been for the internet, would I be where I am today? Would, you know, this podcast certainly wouldn't exist. Would my departure from religion exist? Maybe not. I mean, it has been transformative, and on this, I think you and I agree, my friend. Anything else?
I just had a question on. I heard this story recently about one scientific development that they're working on, and I'm kind of two minds about it. They are developing a way to grow meat with beef stem cells. And on the one hand, I'm thinking to myself, well, this could quite literally solve the problem of world hunger for very little money. You know, vegetarians could actually go back to having a, you know, respectable diet and not starving themselves. And you know, you could be feeding all of these people that can't afford to eat right now. On the other hand, I'm just imagining giant vats full of this pink processed goo.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's something I necessarily would want to be taking into my body.
You know, I just got this, you know, you talk about growing beef, I just have this picture of, you know, Buford out in the garden going, honey, bring me some of them roast seeds and some pork loin seeds and some bacon seeds, would you? I'm going to put them in here and we're going to grow some beef. That's exactly what pops into my mind. So, all right, my friend. I'm going to move on. I appreciate you listening, though, and thanks for a great call, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, take it easy.
You too.
We're just going to go out there and we're just going to grow beef. I'm waiting on the pill that you take it and your hair immediately grows back in perfect proportions. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, that's right. Yeah. I come on. I'm only 45. Please, science. Now's the time. And the pill that you can take, and immediately you have amazing pectoral muscles, and you have Brad Pitt's body essentially without ever having to hit the. Come on, science. You're behind the times. Do something about this, would you? Area code 989. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth, this is Mike. How you doing?
Doing well, Mike. Thanks for calling. Science is just awesome. What do you think about all of this?
Well, I'm right on board with that. I was just listening to some of the stuff you were talking about earlier in the show, and that clip you played from Carl Sagan where he's talking about scientific illiteracy and the people who are leading us reminded me of a story I heard from a few months back where a representative from Georgia was at a church sportsman's banquet, and he said that embryology, evolution, and the Big Bang were lies straight from the pit of hell.
Wow.
And that just struck me. And this is a man who has been elected to serve on the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology.
Well, we've got a politician in the state of Oklahoma. He continues to call evolution a religion. And I just think, God, I mean, this is weapons-grade ignorance.
Yeah. If I were to make the one thing that I've heard about in science news lately that's really got me going, because I like science, I like technology, I'm a big technology buff, but I'm also all about the basic science and all the research that we're doing. The big story lately was about how they found out that empty space isn't quite so empty. There's all these little particles that are popping in and out of existence all the time, and they exist so quickly that we can't measure anything about them. All we can do is see that they were there because of the effects they have on everything. And the thing they found out recently was that these particles might be just by a tiny, tiny amount as it moves through empty space. And so it might lead us to rethink a lot of things about how, not necessarily the whole basics of everything, but how some of our measurements of distances over large distances have worked. And, everybody thinks that, the speed of light, that E equals mc squared, that C, that's the speed of light in a vacuum. And that's supposed to be empty space. There's not supposed to be anything there. But now we're finding out that the stuff in there could act like when you pass light through a crystal and it slows it down and refracts it. Now we're finding out empty space itself can do that. And I think that's just amazing.
It's crazy, isn't it? It changes how we perceive the world. Now, the religious are often ready to pounce on this kind of thing because what they say is, well, science doesn't really know what it knows then. Science is always changing itself. And I'm like, yeah, science is always changing. Thank you very much. To us, we call it a plus. To them, they see it as
learning.
They see it as a declaration of a weak position. Why would you have to change if you truly had the answer? It's that sort of simplistic thinking,
God's word has never changed. It is true yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Amen, brother. You preach it. Thanks for listening, my friend. I appreciate your call very much.
Yep. Thank you. Keep up the great work, buddy.
Thank you. There's a great video. I'm going to link the video. I'm going to remember to go back and link the video from Phil Hellenis called Science Saved My Soul. I had him as a podcast guest a long time ago. And the video, I think, runs about 15 or 20 minutes. It's much too long for me to play here. But there is a transcript of it online, and I grabbed a few paragraphs from it because I thought it was very, very well written. And I'm a big fan. Like, I'm trying to channel my inner Sagan. I really want to sort of translate to everyone else this excitement and passion for learning and for feeling awe about the universe we live in. From Science Saved My Soul, it says this: maybe you need to run away from the mosque, away from the church, away from the priests and the imams, away from the books, to have any chance of finding God. Squeeze a fraction of a galaxy into your mind, and then you'll have a better idea of what you're looking for. To even partially comprehend the scale of a single galaxy is to almost disappear. And when you remember all the other galaxies, you shrink 100 billion times smaller still. But then you remember what you are. The same facts that made you feel so insignificant also tell you how you got here. It's like you become more real, or maybe the universe becomes more real. You suddenly fit. You suddenly belong. You do not have to bow down. You do not have to look away. In such moments, all you have to do is remember to keep breathing. The body of a newborn baby is as old as the cosmos. The form is new and unique, but the materials are 13.7 billion years old. Processed by nuclear fusion in stars, fashioned by electromagnetism. Cold words for amazing processes. And that baby was you. Is you. You're amazing. Not only alive, but with a mind. What fool would exchange this for every winning lottery ticket ever drawn? When I compare what scientific knowledge has done for me and what religion tried to do to me, I sometimes literally shiver. Religions tell children they might go to hell and they must believe, while science tells children they came from the stars and presents reasoning they can believe. I've told plenty of young kids about stars and atoms and galaxies and the Big Bang, and I've never seen fear in their eyes. Only amazement and curiosity. They want more. Why do kids swim in it and adults drown in it? What happens to reality between our youngest years and adulthood? Could it be that someone promised us something so beautiful, That our universe seems dull, empty, even frightening by comparison? It might still be made by a creator of some kind, but religion has made it look ugly. Religion paints everything not of itself as unholy and sinful, while it beautifies and dignifies its errors, lies, and bigotry, like a pig wearing the finest robes. In its efforts to stop us facing reality, religion has become the reality we cannot face. Look at what religion has made us do to ourselves and to each other. Religion stole our love and our loyalty and gave it to a book, to a telepathic father that tells his children that love means kneeling before him. Now, I'm not a parent, but I say that those kids are going to turn out messed up. It cannot be healthy for a child or a species. We were told long ago and for a long time that there was only the earth, that we were the center of everything. That turned out to be wrong. We still haven't fully adjusted. We're still in shock. The universe is not what we expected it to be. It's not what they told us it would be. This cosmic understanding is all new to us. But there's nothing to fear. We're still special. We're still blessed. And there might yet be a heaven, but it isn't going to be perfect, and we're going to have to build it ourselves. If I have something that could be called a soul that needed saving, then science saved it from religion. Very well written. And again, I'll remember to hook you up with a video link to that particular project in the description box of this podcast. Area code 325. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who is this?
This is Ty.
Ty, thanks for calling. We're talking about science. What do you think?
Well, I've been studying psychology and now work as a caseworker. And I just wanted to know what your perspective was on the science, or whatever you want to call it, of psychology.
Do I think it's all a bunch of crap? Well, yeah. I honestly, I'm operating from the outside in. I mean, studying and understanding the human mind and how it works is I think something psychology can speak to. What do you think about it?
Well, honestly, it feels like a new frontier. I mean, it's brand new. I mean, Freud really broke that ground, I guess, with his crazy ideas of if you have a dream, you want to sleep with your mother or whatever. But obviously, it's come a long way since then. But there's a whole lot of conflicting theories, more conflicting theories than I've seen in any other science. And I put my fingers up in quotation marks when I say that. But
I think the complexity of the brain and the fact that, again, science is just now really diving into the deep end. I mean, we as a species in the last 100 years are just now starting to really get into some of this stuff. But I see the brain as an organ, and I think that there are reasons. There is a scientific explanation for how the mind works, how someone gets to a specific position, point of view, or opinion, or psychological state. And for that reason, as long as psychology is dealing in the sciences and it's not jumping out here and, as long as we're not getting into the world of woo, but we're dealing with the brain as an organ. Yeah, I mean, sure. I'm in.
And my second question was, red pill or blue pill?
I want reality.
I have a story. It's like
I want reality.
Back in my golden days, or whatever, smoking, having some fun. First time I watched that movie, I blew my mind away. But I mean, it wasn't because it was machines running our lives or anything. It was because a movie could mind fuck me that hardcore. But just the idea that we were living in something, but we'd never have true understanding until somebody came up to us with a blue or red pill. But honestly, the whole when I came into atheism, I felt like I was given a red and then a blue pill. Then I
think about the film. Cypher sitting there eating an unbelievably scrumptious steak in a beautiful restaurant, and he has everything he wants, and he is that attractive? Sure, a happy fantasy can be very attractive. But I'm honestly a red pill kind of cat, man. I think I'm going to try to live in the real world for better or for worse and see what happens. Okay?
It was very good, yeah.
All right, dude. Thanks for the call. I appreciate you, my friend.
Hey, no problem.
All right. I did a video back in May of last year that sort of addressed the concept that everything revolved around us. We are the center of the universe. We are the center of all things. Hell no, we're not. We're not the center of all things. We're not the center of the galaxy. We're not the center of the. We're just not. And of course, that hurts a lot of people's feelings. It's so sad. I am not all that special. The universe just doesn't care. And, it takes a little while for some of us who crawl out of the religious cocoon to get around that. But I've come to see it as an amazing thing. I do not see it as bad news. It is not necessarily a reason to take the blue pill and to go back into fantasy land. I think there is merit to saying that it is just awesome to not be the central hub of all life. The reason that time and space exists, the reason God spun the cosmos into existence was just for you and me. Well, we don't require thinking like that to really be able to experience awe and to experience the wonder and to have a wonderful life and to know that we have a very special place in it. And so I produced a video in the late spring, early summer of last year. And I had it narrated by a wonderful talent. His name is L. Harvey Gold. And it's called The Center of All Things. And I was thinking of a way to sort of cap the show tonight, and I couldn't come up with a better way than to just play you the audio of this project. And again, if you want to see the video, and I suggest you do so, it's got a lot of amazing visual cues that sort of bring it to a whole other level. But I think the audio stands on its own. I will include the video link in the description box here. But with your approval, I would like to leave you tonight with sort of my own little tribute to science. I call it the center of all things.
Imagine what it was like for those who came before us at the dawn of humankind, when the earth was flat, when the moon and sun were our mother and father, and when the stars were just pinholes in the curtain of the sky. When we drew our history with primitive pictures, when we fashioned our shelters inside the cold rock of the landscape, when a long life was 30 years, when everything we saw was a sign, a flash from the sky meant God was angry. When the earth shook, the spirits were displeased. The floodwaters came, and we begged for forgiveness. The volcano erupted, and we appeased it with sacrifices. We suffered sickness and disease, and we called it a curse. When loved ones perished, and we called it judgment. Everything was beyond our understanding. Mysterious, strange, wondrous, terrifying, unknown. Yet somehow we believed that we were the center of all things. And then we began to see our world with new eyes. The moon was a place we would one day visit and leave our footprints in the dust. The sun was a brilliant cascade of helium and hydrogen. A star, a single solitary star among billions of other stars inside a single galaxy, alongside hundreds of billions of other galaxies in a universe born billions of years before us. The tempests above us, the fire beneath us. They became explainable, measurable, often foreseeable. Our crude illustrations gave way to rich expressions of picture and verse that ignited the imagination. We built our shelters from wood, mortar, glass, and steel. We discovered living worlds beyond the naked eye, and we inhabited that world to understand and begin to conquer sickness and disease. We began to unlock the code of our very being and discovered the bond we share with all living things. We celebrated long lives of over 100 years. Our age is a new age of enlightenment. At this very moment, humankind is beginning to grow beyond the childish fears of its infancy, to refuse to be satisfied with unanswered questions, to acknowledge a universe much grander and more wonderful than the superstitions of our ancestors would ever allow. And to understand that even though we occupy a tiny planet inside a vast universe, we are still part of it. We are growing. We are learning. We are achieving. We are evolving. To finally understand that we are not the center of all things.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.